Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
In the intellectual annals of the 20th century, few works arrived with the seismic force of Jacques Derrida's 1972 magnum opus of Grammatology. This dense, labyrinthine text represents far more than a mere philosophical treatise. It is a foundational document of post-structuralism and a radical re-interrogation of the entire Western metaphysical tradition. The book embarks on an audacious project to expose and dismantle what Derrida identifies as logocentrism, the pervasive and historically unexamined privileging of speech, or the logos, as the locus of truth, presence, and authenticity. In its place, Derrida proposes a new science of grammatology, an investigation into the conditions of writing understood in a vastly expanded sense. This was a gesture destined to reconfigure the humanities, initiating a profound intellectual vertigo from which many fields of inquiry have yet to fully recover, forcing a confrontation with the very grounds upon which meaning is constructed. The work's enduring power resides in its meticulous deconstruction of the foundational oppositions that have structured Western thought for millennia, revealing the intricate play of difference that undergirds all systems of signification. The intellectual terrain from which of grammatology emerged was rich with the very assumptions it sought to subvert. Derrida's primary interlocutors were the giants of phenomenology, structuralism, and existentialism. The phenomenological project of Edmund Husserl, with its quest for a pure, unmediated intuition and a return to the things themselves, represented a quintessential expression of the metaphysics of presence that Derrida targeted. Husserl's desire for a self-present consciousness, free from the corrupting influence of signs, offered a perfect foil. Simultaneously, the structural linguistics of Ferdinand de Saussure provided both a crucial tool and a primary object of critique. Derrida seized upon Saussure's revolutionary insight that language is a system of differences without positive terms, meaning that a signifier derives its value from its relational opposition to other signifiers. Yet, Saussure himself remained captive to the logocentric prejudice, explicitly characterizing writing as a secondary, parasitic representation of speech, a mere notation for the living voice. This phonocentrism, the privileging of sound in the production of meaning, became a specific focus of Derrida's analysis. The work also extends Martin Heidegger's own critique of the history of metaphysics as the forgetting of the question of being in favor of a focus on present beings. Derrida saw in Heidegger a thinker who came closest to escaping the logocentric enclosure, yet who ultimately recoiled, seeking a more authentic, poetic speech as a final refuge from the technological instrumentality of language. Of grammatology thus situates itself at a critical nexus, weaponizing the insights of its predecessors against their own residual metaphysical commitments. The core of Derrida's argument is an intricate and systematic dismantling of the hierarchical binary opposing speech to writing. Within the Western tradition, speech has consistently been aligned with interiority, life, and immediate presence, while writing is cast as exterior, artificial, and derivative, a mere technique for storing and transmitting a plenitude that originates elsewhere. Derrida's revolutionary move is to show that the characteristics traditionally assigned to written difference, spacing, absence, and iterability in fact the prior conditions for any language whatsoever, including speech. He introduces the concept of arche-writing, or arche-writing, to name this generalized field of inscription. Arche-writing is the originary movement of difference that makes signification possible. It is the structured possibility of the trace, the fundamental spacing and temporalization at the heart of any system. This concept displaces both speech and writing in their conventional senses, asserting the more foundational logic of differentiation that precedes and enables them. This leads directly to one of Derrida's most celebrated neologisms, différance. The term, intentionally ambiguous in its spelling to be discernible only in writing, combines the French verb différer's dual meanings of to differ and to defer. Différance designates the endless, active, and non-originating play of differences that constitutes signs and produces meaning. It is a movement of spatial differentiation, where each element is constituted by the traces of other elements within the system. It is also a movement of temporal deferral, where the meaning of a sign is never fully present but always postponed, caught in a chain of signification that refers to other signs ad infinitum. There is no transcendental signified, no ultimate, self-present meaning outside this relational web. The concept of the trace is inextricable from this movement. A trace is the mark of an absent element within a present one. It is what makes an element relate to something other than itself. For Derrida, there is nothing before the trace. The idea of a pure origin, a moment of simple presence before the inception of difference to philosophical illusion, a convenient fiction sustaining the metaphysics of presence. The second part of Grammatology, titled Nature, Culture, Writing, provides a masterful demonstration of deconstructive practice through a sustained reading of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau becomes the archetypal logocentric thinker, a philosopher who valorizes the purity of nature, the authenticity of self-presence in the solitary conscience, and the living breath of speech as the transparent expression of passion. He famously condemns writing as a dangerous supplement, a corrupting addition that pathologically replaces the natural presence of speech. Derrida's reading meticulously exposes the internal contradictions of Rousseau's own texts. He demonstrates how Rousseau, in his essay on the origin of languages and his confessions, consistently and unwittingly reveals that the supplement is necessary from the very beginning. Writing, the supposed evil, is required to make up for a lack in the supposed origin. Speech, for Rousseau, already needs supplementing. Nature itself is already structured like a text, requiring interpretation. The dangerous supplement thus reveals a fundamental insight. It adds itself only to replace an origin that was already incomplete, never fully present to itself. This logic of supplementarity shatters the fantasy of a pure, self-sufficient origin, showing that the so-called derivative term was always already at work within the supposedly primary one. The immediate impact of grammatology within the Anglophone Academy, particularly following Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak's masterful 1976 translation and critical preface, was profound and polarizing. In literary studies, it fueled the rise of the Yale School of Deconstruction, where critics like Paul Deman, J. Hillies Miller, and Jeffrey Hartman applied its methods to canonical literary texts. Their readings sought to expose the aporias, or points of undecidable contradiction, within a text, demonstrating how a work's rhetorical structures systematically undermine its stated philosophical claims. This approach transformed literary criticism from a search for unified meaning or authorial intent into an investigation of the text's inherent linguistic instabilities. Beyond literary theory, the book's influence began to permeate a vast array of disciplines. Its critique of ethnocentrism, articulated through an analysis of Claude Lévi-Strauss, provided powerful tools for postcolonial theorists like Homi K. Bhabha, who used deconstructive strategies to analyze the ambivalent and contradictory nature of colonial discourse. In gender studies, Judith Butler's foundational work on performativity is deeply indebted to Derrida's concepts of iterability and the trace, arguing that gender identity is constituted through the stylized repetition of acts, a citation of norms, that is never a perfect copy and thus always open to subversion. Even fields like architecture felt its influence, with the deconstructivist movement of architects like Peter Eisenman and Zaha Hadid attempting to manifest the principles of fragmentation and instability in built forms. Such a radical intervention was destined to attract fierce opposition. From the quarter of analytic philosophy, John Searle launched a famous attack, accusing Derrida of misunderstanding J.L. Austin's speech act theory and of fostering a kind of textual idealism where there is nothing outside the text. Searle championed the stability of authorial intention and communicative rationality against what he perceived as Derrida's nihilistic free-for-all. This inaugurated a long and often fractious debate that highlighted the profound chasm between Anglo-American and continental philosophical traditions. From a political perspective, thinkers with Marxist leanings, such as Terry Eagleton in his earlier work, sometimes criticized deconstruction for what they saw as its apolitical formalism, an endless and self-referential game of textual analysis that diverted attention from the material realities of class struggle and historical change. The German philosopher Jürgen Habermas, a defender of the Enlightenment project of communicative rationality, argued that Derrida was caught in a performative contradiction, using the tools of logical argumentation to dismantle the very possibility of rational understanding. These critiques, while often predicated on significant misreadings, forced a clarification and a deepening of the deconstructive project. Derrida and his proponents consistently argued that deconstruction, far from being apolitical, was an intensely ethical and political practice, one that sought to expose the violent hierarchies embedded within language and to remain vigilant to the call of the other that is effaced by totalizing systems of thought. The famous phrase, "Il n'y a pas de Horstext," often mistranslated, means something closer to "there is no outside of context," a reminder that all reality is mediated through systems of signification and, in retrospect, of Grammatology stands as a monumental and unavoidable work of late 20th century thought. It is a text that fundamentally reoriented the task of philosophy from a pursuit of stable origins, self-present truths, and foundational certainties to a meticulous analysis of the differential, deferred, and textual conditions that produce the very effects of presence and meaning. Derrida's work offers a powerful diagnostic of a deep-seated Western intellectual habit, tracing the logocentric impulse from Plato through Rousseau to Saussure. By revealing the originary complexity of the trace and the inescapable logic of the supplement, he exposes the philosophical desire for purity as a nostalgic illusion. The book does away with the comfort of a simple beginning or an ultimate end, leaving us instead with the infinite and intricate responsibility of interpretation within a world already written. In an era increasingly defined by digital inscription, virtual realities, and the proliferation of new forms of textuality, the central insights of grammatology feel prescient. The enduring legacy of this formidable book is its relentless demonstration that the world is structured like a language, and that to engage with it critically requires us to become, in the most profound sense, grammarians of the human condition.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.